Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, as the case may be. I am Hyle Rutledge. I'm the president, principal consultant here at OKA, a consulting and training firm out of Fairfax, Virginia. I'm here with my colleague, Harris Vanneroff. So thank you, Harris, for being here and helping me out here. I want to introduce you to the DRIV. It's a new tool, brand new to OKA, pretty new to the world. It's not even been out and about for a year yet. And so I want to introduce you to this, to the model, to the theory, to the tool, what it is. Take whatever questions that you have, and give you the opportunity to take it if you're interested at the end of this. So I appreciate your carving out some time. We are going to be, I'm going to be sharing my slides and then coming back frequently to this Brady Bunch array so I can see you and we can talk and share questions. And so you've got a chat pod that is open. Please feel free to dump any questions or curiosities or concerns in the chat pod. I'm trying to take a look at it. Harris is here. He'll make sure that stuff is grabbed. I'm also going to stop periodically and take whatever questions you have. So I'd love to see your face and hear your question right from you. If you prefer it that way, that'd be great. And the other thing is we'll do a couple of exercises and actually in the chat pod, like use it as a big flip chart page. And so we'll be going back and forth as we go. This session is being recorded. Just in the event that somebody, because there are a number of people want to be here who can't, there might be something that you are interested in going back and seeing or replaying, and so you'll have the opportunity to do that should you want to. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everybody carving out some time on a Thursday morning or afternoon to do that. And so let's jump in and get going, just to make sure if you can hear me, see me, and you get what we're doing. If you can just open up your chat pod if it's not already, and just type in "drive on" or "got it" or "let's go," or so that I know we're on the same path. Drive on, got it. Okay, nice. I'm delighted that you are here, Michelle. You've got it. Good. Then let's go ahead and jump in. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and let's take a look at driving forward and an introduction to the DRIV. And so let's see here. Yep. So let's have what we're going to do today is I want to talk about motives and why motives matter. And I'm going to just jump into this big model here in a couple of different places just to give you a real feel of what's here. I want to explore forgiveness and accountability. And then I'm going to do the same thing in a different way with creativity and deliberation. So I'm just kind of cherry picking a couple of concepts to kind of introduce you to the flavor of this model, the flavor of this tool. I want to tell you a little bit about how the tool is developed, what it looks like, and where it comes from. And then sum up with taking your questions and talking about some next steps if you are interested enough to take any of those. And so we'll see, but that's where we're going over the hour or so. We will be finished by the top of the hour, by noon Eastern time, but I'm not in a hurry. And if you have, I'll hang around and answer questions if you have them. So there's not a hard stop for me, but I will finish our content by then if you've got somewhere else you need to be, right? Glad you're here. The question I have for you to start us off is, why are you here? Why are you here? I'm very happy that you're here, but I'm interested in why you decided to carve out an hour to come here. And so if you could just chat in, whatever that answer, if you care to answer, and if you're willing to answer, why are you part of today's session? So interested more about this. Motivation is something that interests you. You're just curious, interested in learning more about this assessment, always interested in new assessments, more about this assessment. Good. At our organization, we're looking to get to answer this kind of thing for my folks. Is this a complement to our use of emotional intelligence? So will it specifically help with that? Love learning about new tools, interested in learning about new assessments, new ways to motivate and energize myself and my team. And so some great answers. And so the reason I asked is this. Let me take us back. That the idea with this, that there are lots of common answers for why somebody comes to this or a session like this. And so maybe it could be you've got a commercial focus or a wealth thing that I want to make money. I want to make money for my organization. I want the organization to do well. I want to make money. And I think this might give me an edge in terms of gathering some money for myself. So maybe it's that. A lot of you are motivated by growth in terms of, I just want to be better. I want to get better at this. I want to be better. And I also want to help foster growth and development in other people. And this might help me do that. It could. Some people have a wisdom driver that I really like learning, and I like becoming more expert in things, and I like owning the knowledge myself. And so I really want to sharpen my wisdom, and this helps me do that. It could very well be that rapport is something that brings you here, that I like being nice and relating to others. I was invited, and I like saying yes to invitations. It meant a lot to you. It means a lot to me. So there's a personal connection that this is helping me with. Competition. That I like having the edge. I like being better than the other trainers, the other consultants or coaches out there. And here's a new tool they don't have. And so I can be one up on my competitors this way. And so there are lots and lots of different reasons. I thank you for sharing yours with me. But the thing is, why did you come is important. Why you do anything is important. And here's the underpinning idea here. And that is that there's behavior. And behavior is what you do, what you say, the choices you make, how you present yourself, what you look like, what you sound like when you show up to the world. Those are your behaviors. And so you show up and you're friendly to me and you help me out, or you actively work against me. Let's say you fight me. You show regret and you say that you're sorry. You go here, you go there, you do this, you do that. There's stuff you do, that's behavior. Now, many tools and learning and development kind of models are constructed to kind of highlight and to help us understand our behavior, what we do, and even measure that behavior. How much of that do you do? Somebody mentioned the emotional intelligence. That's what emotional intelligence is. It's a behavioral model, and it measures how frequently do you do these different behaviors. Well, that's powerful. But separate from that is this idea of motive. Motive refers to the conscious, or in some cases unconscious, need that drives what you do, the why you do that. Why did you make that choice? What caused you to show up in that way? And so why are you helping me or working against me? Why are you fighting me? Why did you just say I'm sorry? And are you really? Why do you go here, go there, go there? Why? What's pushing you? What's driving you in that situation? That really understanding somebody, really understanding yourself, and more practically being able to predict that behavior requires you to know not just what you're doing, but why you're doing that. The needs, the values, the deeply rooted habits you have that are kind of driving your behavioral choices. And one of the things that I would ask you to do, if you're not muted, if you could mute yourself. Most of you are, but I think there are a couple people kind of close to the mic. So if you can mute yourself, it would clean up the audio, and then just unmute yourself when you have a question. Anyway, if you haven't, if you could do that, that'd be great. Thank you. And so that is the underpinning of the drive. So the drive assessment is a really nicely researched, we'll get to that tool that you can use for individuals, for leaders, for teams, for whole systems, that kind of gives us access to, I think, what you're going to find to be an actionable approach to the forces beneath your behavior, what's driving your behavior, what's driving you, and what's draining you. And so the why beneath the what. So before I get into just the macro of the theory, I just thought it might be helpful for us to jump in and get really specific with it. And so I decided of the different drivers, and there are 28 of them. So there are 28 drivers within this model. It's a nice, expansive model. I'm just going to introduce you to one, and this is one that just jumped out at me. It grabbed me because of its role in my life and in my life right now. And so I wanted to, this will be the doorway I choose to take you through into this model. Forgiveness. So forgiveness is defined here as the drive to let go of the past. So I'm going to let go of past transgressions, past wrongs, past events, because I want to have a relationship with you that's free of resentment, that's free of turmoil. And so because I want this kind of free and open, kind of positive relationship with you, I let go of all of that. That's forgiveness. So that's how it's defined here. And so what just to define what that is, if forgiveness is something that is active in you, there's an active drive for forgiveness, then that means that you're driven to forgive, to let go of wrongs, to kind of maintain these positive, kind of open, resentment-free relationships. And the more you're driven by forgiveness, the more that's true. Now, on the downside of that, if you are not driven by forgiveness, that is not a thing that's active in you, then what that means is that you kind of hold on to your history with people. You think it's important for justice. You think it's important for the reality that you hold on to that. And that means that people and groups are held to account for past actions. Well, that's pretty good too. So it's not like good people are high forgiveness and bad people are low forgiveness. It's a very different set of beliefs and values and motives, no matter where you are on this line. So what the question I have for you, think about yourself with that very little bit of data. And I'm interested in if on this, think about a 100-point scale, if 0 meant I never forgive, and I actively avoid turning the page. And 100 is I always forget. If you could imagine a line where that's bookended with that, my question is, what would you give yourself on a 100-point scale? That's not a lot of data to go on, but think about it. 0 to 100, where would you be? And just put it in the chat pod. I'm just interested in what, there's no good or bad, but those are different drivers. So we got 70, 75, 85, 90, 82, 90, 90, 30, 20, 85, 97. So all right. Elise. Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw that Elise is part of the group. Oh, there you are. Yeah. Anyway, great to see you, Elise. Old classmate of mine. And so it depends on what we're talking about. Maybe 100. And so you need more data. I get it. But so here's what. Let's talk about this one thing a little bit more. And I got a video I want to show you that you could see some of this in action. And so one of the things here, if you're on this scale here, this 100-point scale, you could be toward the middle. We had some folks on the lower end and a bunch on the higher, and we didn't have a lot of people straddling the fence here. But when that happens in life, what we're talking about is that it suggests some ambivalence about this. It's a situational use of forgiveness. You're as likely to forgive somebody as you are as to not forgive them, and you forgive this person but not this person. If it's this topic, yes. This topic, no. Tuesday, yes. Wednesday, no. I mean, it depends, and I need more information. And so that you kind of can occupy this middle ground here. That's a very common place to be. And so what I want to do is think about, so what does forgiveness and the lack of it, what does it look and sound like? So I want to show you a movie clip that'll show us that. I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to generate some answers in just a minute. But first, let's take a look at this movie. It's a short clip, about a minute and a half. And it's a clip from the movie Invictus, which is a true story about Nelson Mandela. Just in the event that you don't know some of the details, Nelson Mandela was a political prisoner. He was actually imprisoned for over 25 years by the white majority government of South Africa. He gets out of jail, runs for president, and wins. And so he is the new president of South Africa. And as he's putting his team together, he actually has this brief discussion with his chief of security. And so I want you to take a look at it. It looks to me like we have somebody who's high forgiveness talking to somebody in his chief of security who is low forgiveness. And just look at this exchange. What do you think about this scene in terms of their forgiveness stance, this scene from Invictus?
In the word of this thing.
Sorry to disturb you, sir.
You look agitated, Jason.
Well, that's because there are 4 special branch cops in my office.
Oh, what did you do?
Nothing. But they say they're the presidential bodyguards and they have orders signed by you.
Ah, yes. Well, these men are special trained by SAS. They have lots of experience. They protected the clerk.
Yes, sir, but it doesn't mean that they have to come...
You asked for more men, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I asked...
When people see me in public, they see my bodyguards. You represent me directly. The Rainbow Nation starts here. Reconciliation starts here.
Reconciliation, sir.
Yes, reconciliation, Jason.
Comrade President, not long ago, these guys tried to kill us. Maybe even these 4 guys in my office tried and often succeeded.
Yes, I know. Forgiveness starts here, too. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That is why it is such a powerful weapon. Please, Jason. Try.
Sorry to disturb you, sir.
Okay, so I'm interested at what does the demonstration of forgiveness look like? And so let's actually go to the chat pod. And Anna, I have not forgotten I see your question. I will answer that. So we're getting to that. Thank you. Think about if you're working with somebody that's high in forgiveness, as we're talking about here, what does that behavior look and sound like? How would you describe that? It doesn't have to be Nelson Mandela you're talking about, just someone who exercises this. What are the adjectives you would hang on high forgiveness? And so they're good at letting go, compassionate, they're courageous, they're humble. So there's a humility to them, trusting with awareness, empathic, understanding. There's an egolessness to that. I think that's totally true. Now, now realize all of these are positive attributes. Now, these are nice adjectives that would be nice to have hung on you. It doesn't all have to be positive. There's a downside, I think. So what might that be? It could be a walkover. I mean, so somebody that's just walking, you walk right over them. I mean, so they're naive. They're a doormat. They're potentially weak, or can look weak, like a pushover kind of thing. So realize it's a both and. That the price of all that goodness is there. It could be seen, and maybe even could be some of this other stuff. It's perfect. Now. But while we're here, I want to switch switch the list here. Describe somebody that's low in forgiveness. So somebody who is low in forgiveness, like the chief of security, perhaps. What does that behavior look like if you're low in forgiveness? So suspicious, distrustful, rigid, untrusting, angry, wary, bitter, limited, anxious. So yeah, I mean, I give all that and amen, brothers and sisters. But at the same time, those seem to be kind of critical and negative. What about the positive side of being on the low forgiveness? Because that's there too. Remember, there's both and. Sad soul, holding a grudge, mistrustful. I think all of that is too protective, and protective isn't necessarily a bad thing. Accountable and interested in accountability. Holding and maintaining boundaries. And so being clear about your own values, accountability, fairness, the idea of fairness, of justice. Well, that's about accountability. Think about when somebody who has done something wrong is held to account, there's a sense of justice there. And that's low forgiveness, at least in that instance. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's interesting to kind of take a look at the different ends of the spectrum. Great list. Thank you. And what that means. Let me take you back to slides to do some so what here. Now, when we are taking a look at this, we talked about if people who are high in forgiveness, and we saw this in the Nelson Mandela character, but again, we don't have to frame this as, I mean, it's hard not to want to be and think you should be doing what Nelson Mandela is doing, but the thing is, high forgiveness is and can look forgiving and compassionate and harmonious, and the dozen plus things that you all came up with that are even better. Now, at the same time, that can also look like and be framed as soft, weak-willed, lacking in fortitude, blind to justice, overly personal, overly sensitive. Somebody even said a doormat and weak-looking. That's also something to be aware of, that if I show up exercising and being more driven by forgiveness than those around me, that's what I'm going to look like. On the downside, that if I forgive and am driven toward forgiveness less than those around me, I'm going to really look really justice focused, accountability oriented. I can also look pretty unforgiving, vengeful, vindictive, kind of backward looking, stuck in the past, stern, angry, mired in resentment. A lot of those were issues you brought up. I mean, things that came up in the list. And so it's really interesting. This is one scale of 28. It's a juicy model here, but there's a lot of interesting action to play out. And so one of the things that I think a good tool allows us to have some sense of ourselves, and based on that sense of me, I can have a new and refreshed, more informed sense of you and of us, and to understand not just that you are forgiving or not, but why. What is it that is driving that? And then we can make some more informed, intentional choices about what do we do with that, given that we're married, or given that we're on this team together, or given that we're clients, or given that whatever, citizens, people in the world, what do we do with that? And so here's something that I find useful. It's one of the uses. It's not the only thing that we do with this model, but it's one of the things that I like it a lot. This is like I said, there are 28 drivers, and there's a lot to see here, but that's I'll give you a quick intro to those in just a minute. But it turns out that you can leverage a driver that you're active in, a driver that you have access to that's really strong with you. You can leverage it to task it to do something that you find hard. So for instance, how do you help someone to forgive when forgiveness is draining? How do you help the chief of security in that movie clip to actually step into some of their forgiveness? Well, there are lots of different ways, but you would need to, if it's going to be successful, you need to hook a driver that actually is pretty active with them. Like for instance, growth may be. Now, growth is the drive to learn, to grow, to personally develop. It's about ambition and getting better, driving forward. If you're into emotional intelligence, self-actualization is the growth, a correlated driver here. And so it could be that, yeah, I'm not into forgiveness, but I am into growth. And if you can task my forgiving this person as a growth challenge for me, as something that would make me better, or reach that best step, or that could be a good hook, perhaps. Now, inclusion might be another one. Let's say forgiveness is my bag, but I am really interested in inclusion, that the active engagement of other people, of diverse opinions, of making people feel welcome and comfortable, safe in their identity. And if that's a driver for me, my drive to include you actually would be well served by my forgetting what happened, even though that's not the first thing I want to do. So that's possible. Another one, and this is the last one I'll show you for this one. It could be just very, very practical. There's a profit motive for me in doing this. And so, yeah, I really would like to hold you to account, Karen or Michelle, Pamela, I'd love to, but it turns out there's money to be made, and I can make more of that if I just kind of turn the page and forget about that. And so that's a very different driver, but that hook might do it. And so you can leverage. Just quickly to show you, how about in the other direction? How might you help somebody who's high in forgiveness to step back a little bit from that? If you overdo it, how do you help counter that? And so it could be, and that's more my challenge. Forgiveness is a big one for me, is a strong driver for me. And sometimes, frankly, it's gotten in my way. And so it could be that there's a commercial focus. It's better for the company if I hold you person to account. Personally, I don't really care that much about it, but it's better off for the bottom line. Or maybe compliance. If I'm into following the rules, I don't really care about this, but the rule says you should be held to account, and so I will do it. Alignment is a driver that's where I'm driven to be on the same page with you. It's not about following the rules. It's about all of us kind of doing the same thing and singing from the same sheet of music. I like it when we're all in alignment. And so I don't really care, but my colleagues all do. And it's more important that I be in step with them. And so I'll do it. And so there are different ways you can that you can do that and use this information, and leveraging is one of my favorites. And so I'm interested, and we'll take a little pause here and just talking about forgiveness and or anything in the model so far. You don't know very much about the model, but yeah.
I've gotten a couple questions in the chat, so I'll just share them with you.
Thank you.
Sergio asked, where is the research that validates and shows the reliability of this instrument? I know you do get into that. So do we want to pause that, or what would be the best thing?
No, Sergio, that's critical for this or any tool. And so it comes from OKA'S theory of planned behavior is the origin of the model. And so it comes up through a literature review that was it's well documented, and I'm going to get to it in about 15-20 minutes. So this is an important question, but let's put a pin in it because we're coming right back to it. Thank you for that.
We got another one. Anna, does it count if you forgive and learn to be careful around the person? So I guess does it change, I think is what Anna was getting at.
And so I saw that question earlier on, Anna, and the thought is that if the more it's I'll forgive you asterisk given these conditions, or but now there's this residue, or those kinds of things, that what that looks like is that's just sliding a little bit down on the scale, which again the goal isn't to be at 100 on this or anyone, so it's value neutral no matter where you are. But somebody that is and I'm making up the numbers, but if it's a 100-point scale, somebody who's 60 to 70 kind of thing could be that, yeah, I want to get there, and I will forgive you more often than not, but I'm still aware that you did this, and I'd like to have these things done, and sometimes I won't. And so it's conditional, which is different from somebody who comes at the world a 90 on forgiveness. That's just, yeah, I'm going to do it. It'd be nice if you were contrite. It would be nice if it, but I'm likely to do it anyway. I just don't hold on to those kinds of things, even when it might be wise for me to do it. I tend not to, and which is different from somebody who's, let's say, 15, 20 down at the bottom, who I'm not going to. I don't think it's reasonable, and I don't trust the people who do. I mean, for the most part, and so people who, yeah, I can, but that is a statement of where you are on the line, I think.
So I was thinking about it also as kind of setting some boundaries, that you realize what's okay, what's not okay, can let go of the resentment from a particular action or whatever.
Right.
But you're also aware of maybe where you use this person or how you, and then I was thinking particularly in a team context of really needing to be protective of everybody and supportive of everybody. And
Right.
it's kind of that individualization of, right place, right time, right boundaries.
And when you think, Anna, of, in addition to this, because I use forgiveness as just a doorway, but there's also collaboration and inclusion and rapport and honesty and and each one of those takes a little, touches these issues somewhat. And when you stack up that I'm high honesty and I'm high forgiveness, but I also am high autonomy. And when you stack some of these things up, it really does bring some nuance to that forgiveness you've just given me. It's or not, that, and that's totally true. Any other burning ones, or Harris?
Yeah. The only other question we had a couple others, but I know you talked about, we'll get into the history and development of the instrument. There was a couple questions around that. There was a couple questions around the inverse correlation, because some of them are italicized. So I got into that, just mentioning that you will get into explaining that, how the drivers
so
are
let's jump into that. There's one other bit of content I want to show you, and that before we get into the creation of the model and tool, that I think you might find it interesting. So I'm going to go quickly through this, but let me share that with you. So we've only seen forgiveness now. I'm going to pull in a couple other drivers just to give you a little bit more expansive view, and to show one of the ways that I use this with teams and groups. And so creativity is one of the drivers. Now, creativity is the drive to create new. And so it's new, it's innovation. I want to solve complex problems by bringing new and interesting, not done before kind of solutions. And so it's this drive to reinvent, to push forward. Now, if I do that, then that is, and if I'm driven more by creativity than those around me, I'm going to be seen as creative and clever, imaginative, innovative. All that's great. I can also show up looking kind of flighty and practical, inefficient and practical, kind of confusing. And so that's the price for that. I mean, that's the possibility there. And on the low side of creativity, that's somebody who's kind of interested in and attracted to the security of the known. It's the efficient, well-traveled path. We know it. It's established as an answer or a solution. Why fix what isn't broken? Why reinvent the wheel? And so if that's and that's a totally logical and rather common approach. And if that's the case, these folks driven by that tend to be practical, efficient, kind of grounded, history aware, efficient in their focus. That can also be or look uninspired and boring and limited in scope and a small thinker. I mean, all those things are also true. And so I want to tie this in. Think about creativity. Put a pin in that for a second. I'm going to pair that with this other one. It's deliberation. Now, deliberation is about the drive for deliberation is wanting to be cautious and careful. I want all of the data because I'm loath to make a mistake, and I want all the data before we move forward. And so it's motivated by being slow, being thoughtful, being careful about moving forward. And a lot of people high in deliberation will even ruminate on decisions made to wonder, I wonder if I did that right. I wonder if I could have done better on that, or if I made a mistake. So the high deliberation, that is, and that looks thorough, cautious, careful, oftentimes thought of as good planners. The other side of that is that it can be or look indecisive, nervous, even cowardly, procrastinating. Now, on the low side of deliberation, this is somebody who's interested in let's go. I'll never have all the data I can have, and so don't even bother. Move. Let's get going. Well, and so speed is of the essence. Low deliberation looks decisive and bold and confident. It also is and can look rash, short-sighted, foolish, impatient, a hair trigger kind of approach to things. So think about caution and creativity and deliberation, because I want to pair them up. There are certain drivers that just play so boldly in our work life together. These are two, and I like to stack them on top of each other so we can think about, are you low or high creativity, and are you low or high deliberation? Now, I know we have a 100-point scale for just the ease of this matrix. I think about just over 50 is high, under 50 is low, just so that everybody kind of is plunked into the model here. And so let's quickly think about what this means. If you're high creativity and low deliberation, what that means is that you're innovative, creative, unconventional, and you're really fast-paced, quick to act. Let's do it now. Well, you can also, though, be high creativity and high deliberation. And what that means is that you're innovative, creative, unconventional, but you're driven to kind of slow down. You're loath to make mistakes, and let's be cautious about how we go and what the next step is as we create and invent. Low creativity and high deliberation is, I'm attracted to the known proven path or solution, and slow down. Let's make sure we're not making mistakes. And then you can finally be low creativity and high deliberation. I'm driven to stay on the known proven path, and I want to get this thing done quickly. And in fact, we're freed up to do it quickly because we're already doing things we know work. And so there are 4 different places that people can, and they're rather common places to be. Recently, I was working with a team, 6 people, and I had 2 that were high creativity and low deliberation, 1 high creativity, high deliberation, and 3. And in the upper left-hand corner, the high creativity and low deliberation, of those 2, one of them was the boss. One of them was the leader of the 6. And so there was an interesting tension here. And what most concerned me was the tension here between these groups, because I know we already said it, but just to emphasize it, in terms of the folks who are high in creativity, often, not always, but often saw their low creativity counterparts as being kind of uninspired, boring, limited in scope, a small thinker. I mean, there was some frustration about that, but realized those folks actually saw their high creativity counterparts, one of them who was the boss, as being kind of impractical, inefficient, confusing, always changing, and a bit flighty. And so there was an important tension to address there. And then on the deliberation end, the deliberative, the ones driven towards high deliberation, actually saw their counterparts as being rash and foolish and impatient and too quick to act, reckless. Now, whereas deliberation, the folks low in deliberation thought, oh my God, my colleagues are so slow, they're so indecisive and nervous and afraid, and it really is weighing us down. And so when we looked at this, what jumped out at me was, how do we use this to frame this so that you understand why I want to go slowly or quickly, or why I want to reinvent or not, and so that we can talk about that. And it's how can we bridge this gap? We could do this through skill building. We could do this by leveraging. It just so happened that this group was, while they were very different on these things, there were drivers that they all held in common. And so let's cling to those drivers, because that's what we most need. In terms of we're all into collaboration, we're all into rapport. While you irritate me in this way, I really like you, and it's important that you like me. And we could grab onto those drivers that bound us together, and then that helps us kind of weather this and deal with this storm. So that's I wanted to share that with you. I want to make sure we get through this next little bit. I'm going to come back to your faces and to ask and answer some of these questions. But let me get to, where did this come from and what's the information behind it? This isn't just to Sergio's question, but Sergio, we're getting to your question. And so this OKA'S is a Polish clinical psychologist, and came up with and researcher, and he has a theory of planned behavior. And the theory of planned behavior asserts that most human behavior is rooted and driven by three factors. There are three factors. They're motivational attitudes, they're values, and then they're the habits, the deep-rooted habits that we engage in and have learned to engage in. And these three things in combination are what drive our behavior. And so in terms of motivational attitudes, that's, what do you want? What do you want? And that is deeply rooted, sometimes even unconscious. But what do I want? That cookie on the counter, do I want that or not? And how much do you want that? So what is it that you want? Your motivations underneath the surface. But separate from my motivations, related, but as separate things are, what are my values and norms about that behavior? Do I think I should have that cookie? What are the rules, the shoulds and oughts that I have within me about that cookie and about taking cookies? And so your values kind of come into play and wrap around that to some degree. But then on top of that, there are habits and control beliefs that in terms of what are the habits and external factors around me, in terms of, do I actually believe I'm able to even take that cookie? I mean, could I, even if yes, I want it, and actually I think I deserve it, but am I even able to reach out and get it? I mean, what's going to happen to me when I do? And and so there's some habits and control beliefs around that as well. These three things come together and actually drive our behavior toward or away from things. And that's why while we're talking about motives, this is not a model of motive, because we see motive being only one of the parts. It's one leg in this three-legged stool of in terms of what drives us. And so why we do what we do, this is what's under the waves. And so the goal of the drive is to better understand, and even to be able to predict. If I understand the why behind your behavior and mine, then I understand that what is likely to push you toward whatever action you do next. And so this was conceived and developed by Dr. Chris Koltis, who is with the organization Leadership Worth Following. They're the publisher of this tool. And he did an expansive literature review to identify the most predictable leadership behaviors, the most measurable and predictable leadership behaviors. And so he kind of he sampled the field cross-culturally to see what are the behaviors that most people talk about, write about, that they are predictably, kind of reliably finding. And he came up with 45 of them from a number of different research and behavioral models. All of this displayed, I mean, so it's all transparent. He's written about this in the tech manual. And then he was interested in, can I find these 45? The kind of cobbled together from kind of best practice in the field. And And so in his working through this, these were the behaviors. What he was interested in is what's kind of driving these behaviors underneath, and what some of these he was not able to replicate. They didn't seem as relevant. Some of these actually merged into one. I mean, so one model called it X, another model called it Y, but he was finding that actually I'm finding the same thing. And so we'll roll this together and just call it rapport or whatever. And that's and so his model came out with 28 drivers. So the 45 is whittled down to 28 of these drivers. And then he realized through correlation that these things kind of batched together, that they trended together, that there were 5 of these that kind of hung together around what he wound up calling impact. And that because they had a correlation with each other. And so through correlations, he realized that these could be batched or sorted into these 6 different groups, which are called factors. So the drive actually has these 6 different factors that are basically like, I think of them as files in which are held the drivers that are all kind of, that hang together or are related to each other. And so let me give you just a quick tour of those, just to show you what they are. That there's an impact factor, and this is collects the 5 drivers that have to do with being influential, with being bold, with showing up and being seen and heard, and actually pushing, driving, influencing the world around you, and doing that quickly. That's impact. Now, the drivers within that factor are charisma, commercial focus, courage, caution, and deliberation. Harris, you had said, another one of our folks here asked the question about some of them were negatively correlated. In this one, caution and deliberation have a negative relationship with impact. So when you think about having what's defined here as high impact, which isn't necessarily what everybody wants or needs. So it's not like everybody should be high impact. But if the thought here of high impact means high charisma, high commercial focus, high courage, and low caution and low deliberation. And so those are the things that are lumped together under impact. Insight, 4 drivers that have to do with creativity, knowledge, and learning. And so we're talking about creativity, growth, wisdom, and compliance. And so insight, what's correlated with this is higher creativity, higher growth, higher wisdom, and lower compliance, lower rule following. Those 4 things trending together is what push for higher insight. Connection. There are 4 drivers that all relate to work relationships and in your engagement with other people in your work. And so what we're looking for here is collaboration, inclusion, and rapport, and low autonomy or lower autonomy. So higher collaboration, higher inclusion, higher rapport, and lower autonomy is what actually results in a higher connection score. And then we got the big one, harmony. Harmony is a huge one with 7 drivers in harmony. And this has to do with basically interpersonal relationships, your connection to other humans, and you're developing a closeness and connection with them. And so we're looking at honesty, forgiveness, and service, and authority, competition, personal wealth, and status. And in terms of harmony, it's the connection here is higher honesty, higher forgiveness, higher service relates to harmony, and then lower authority, lower competition, lower personal wealth, lower status. And so it's lower scores on these tend to be emphasize greater harmony. Right? The productivity, these are 4 drivers that really have to do with your getting stuff done and accomplishing tasks. And so the drivers here are alignment, excellence, persistence, and enjoyment. And productivity is what relates to what is called productivity here is higher alignment, higher excellence, higher persistence, and lower enjoyment. and by the way, the excellence is, so it's defined here. This is one of the things we get into, but the idea of who wants to be low excellence, who wants to be low enjoyment. I mean, nobody wants to wear that t-shirt around. And the idea is it really is value neutral where you are on these scales. Excellence here is defined as having very specific exacting standards of this is what we need to do and this is how we need to do it. In fact, people who are high in excellence tend to keep ratcheting that up about it needs to be just this way, and just so there's a perfectionism to excellence as it's defined here. So low excellence doesn't mean you're not excellent. It means that you're not that hard charging in the weeds on how things are done, and you acknowledge that sometimes good enough is good enough. And it's a check that box. Yes, it's done. Move on to the next one. And that is not a high excellence driver. Enjoyment has to do with not just are you a nice, fun person. It has to do with your well, and so Anna says, I don't see lower enjoyment as a corollary for enjoyment. Here is defined as your belief, how driven are you by the belief that fun and humor need to be a part of the work experience. And so so high enjoyment is that fun and humor are essential, are very important to the work process. The lower you are in enjoyment, the more you see those are not necessarily linked. In fact, the lower in enjoyment you are, the more you tend to think those things tend to be distracting. You're coming in and making a joke or sending me this meme, or that you're do your work then play. And so anyway, that's with the enjoyment scale there. And then the last one, and then is meaning. And these are four. These are all positively correlated about your ascribing your work to some greater kind of meaning. And so we've got authenticity, legacy, purpose, and recognition, all kind of positive. So higher authenticity, legacy, purpose, and recognition all kind of contribute to this idea of meaning. So the 28 in total. And and so we're coming to a kind of wrap up question time here, but just to finish this up here, that score clustering, it was discovered that there were a dozen patterns, there were 12 patterns that we saw that the people, I say we like I had anything to do with it, that they in the research they found that it was common if you were high on these 4 drivers and you also were lower on these 3 drivers, that created a pattern. And we'll call that the entrepreneur. And these are folks who tended to be drawn to careers in X, Y, and Z and get feedback that and so they kind of clumped together and as a thing, as an overall pattern. And so there were 12 of these, and so they actually presented those. You come out with a profile as well, and this is very much high level summary, a way that the meat, the gist of this is in the drivers. What's important are the drivers, but 28 different bits of data can be somewhat overwhelming. This is a way to kind of summarize everything into one kind of unified whole. I like to end my discussions with this for people to read their profile and see that kind of comes together as a generalized, like almost executive summary like statement. But the work that's done here is on the driver level. And so the DRIVE assessment has a leadership report, a team report, a 360 report, actually a 360 report that's very useful, I'm not a huge 360 fan in general, but I really like this one. When you look at the DRIVE instrument, you get a page on each one of your bits of data. So it details the driver score and information on each one of these. And so I think it gives you lots of good information. What one of the things that the report also gives you is a rankers page. So all 28 drivers ranked in descending order. When I look at this, I like to take a look at what are your top 7 and what are your bottom 7. The top and bottom 7 just being the top and bottom quartile, the top 25%, bottom 25%, in terms of the things that are most driving you and most draining you. So it's just nice to have one page where everything is summed up for you. That's in the report as well. And just because I'm a development guy, I do a lot of coaching, a lot of training and development. I went ahead and wrote a book to help put the information to use. We actually just got it back from the printer, so it's a physical book. We're working on how to make this an ebook, but but we just got it from the printer yesterday. But it's yeah, so thank you for that. But we are going to it helps you look at how do you use each one of these scores. And so how to use it to energize, optimize, how to leverage that leveraging idea. I talked about it, gives you some examples of each one of those. What does a 28 score mean? What does a 37 score mean in forgiveness and excellence and blah, 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 whatever. And so to really drill in and get tangible with each of these scores. So that's there's a DRIV workbook that is helpful for that, 64 pages. And so now that we're coming up toward the top of the hour here, as a thank you for attending today's session, if you're still with us and you're interested, you can take the DRIV assessment. Thank you, Harris. Harris put some information in the chat box if you're interested in the DRIV book. But if you're also, Harris is going to reach out to you. And if you're interested in actually taking the DRIV, getting your own scores, and we'll get you some feedback just to see what it's like. So as a thank you for coming today, if you're interested, we'd love to have you participate in that. And do know that there is a certification. OKA is right now the sole certifier on this. We're trying to stand up a program. We've already launched one. It went well. It was last week, I think. But it's a 2-day training. I do those. It's you get to take and receive the DRIV. You explore the model and how to use it. We do these exercises in terms of how do you deliver this and how do you work this within a coaching environment or a training environment. You even get to practice on giving feedback to somebody on their materials. So there's one coming up in April and May, and then others, of course, beyond that. So it's $1,800 for the 2 days, and you can, come see us or talk to us if you're interested in that. There are other dates other than those. So I am. That's it. I know we're up at the top of the hour. If you need to scoot, know that this is being recorded. And so what questions do you have? I'm also not scooting at the top of the hour. So if you want to stay, I'm eager to talk with you if you have questions or critiques or anything about this. So thank you for that. What's Harris, where should we
Yeah,
start?
absolutely. We got a couple questions. One from Dana. Can you talk about how this tool can be used in developing organizational mission? Was the first question, and I got about 4 in the queue, and I'll just keep rattling them off to you.
Cool. Well, yeah, the mission. So one of the things I like, Dana, about using this on the organizational level, on the systems level, is that on the systems level, we're talking often leadership issues, but we're also talking about strategy and mission with kind of big picture things. And so one of the things that I think it's important to do is for the organization, either this can be constructed by the leadership team or actually by representatives from the whole organization, but to determine what are our drivers, what are the drivers that are most important to who and what we are, to our culture here. And so if we're talking about systemic level work, we need to kind of paint up driver portrait of the whole. Now you can do a team report that actually shows what everybody's scores are aggregated. You could do that simply enough, and that's offered, and that's fine. But what that doesn't tell us what's important to our culture here. And so what I have, there's a card deck that we've created. Actually, it's coming back from the printer in about 3 days. But the idea is that groups get together and actually sort out these cards. There are different behaviors, like how often do we do that? How much a part of our kind of cultural expectation is that we do this? We do this a lot. Sometimes, we never do this one. And so let's go through and sort these out. And if I'm doing it over here and you're doing it over there, so a few groups could come together, and where we all agree, we all agree that we do this, that this charisma behavior is really, really important, and that this forgiveness behavior, we don't do that. Now, they're not defined that way, so people aren't thinking about forgiveness and charisma and excellence. They're just looking at the behavior. Once we've kind of created a portrait of these are the drivers that most drive us, and the flip side of that is here are the things, the actions, the drivers that most drain us. Then we get to see how does that align with our culture, with our cultural expectations. Is this might be how we operate, but is that what we want it to be? And so when Marianne comes in, when Anna comes in as our new leader and says, okay, there's a new sheriff in town, and here's what we're going to do. Well, just making that leadership pronouncement doesn't mean we're going to change anything. I mean, the culture is still so deeply rooted to focus in the way it has gone and go where it goes. So first we've got to know what is that. And so I love using this on the cultural level because it kind of lets us know what, as a collective, how are we driven, and therefore what are we driven away from. And there are ways in which that's helping us. There's ways in which that's good news, and there are ways in which we're really challenged by that because we're being blocked from behaviors that otherwise would really benefit us. And how do we rewire that?
Thank you. Thanks. I work with I work for my denomination, and I work with churches all across the Mountain West, and part of what my work is helping them do their values, mission, vision, kind of reset themselves for a vital future. So that's the lens I look at this from, and so that makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much for that.
Well, just real quickly, I don't want to belabor it, but just that's so interesting, Dana, because since you just put it in a faith perspective, so your organizations are churches, right, faith groups, and so some of the work that when you pull church groups together, I've had this before where you have somebody coming in and it's like, and they have a real commercial focus. There are things that we need to boost membership. We need to, because as an organization, we need to exist. But yet the other people sitting around that table are motivated by purpose, and they're motivated by legacy. And in fact, not only am I not motivated by commercial focus, I'm kind of offended that you bring it up because we're not about that. And when the commercial focus might be saying, I care about that purpose and that legacy too, and it's not going to happen if we don't find a way to keep the doors open. And that those can just be so at odds when you take a look at, so I care about this and you don't, and you care about that and I don't. But it turns out there's something else here that we both care about, which is why we're sitting around this table, and we need to have that as our centerpiece because that's going to be our life raft as we wrestle through these other things.
Right.
And that's where I think this has been most useful.
Great. Thank you for that. I don't mean to take up too much time, but thank you very much for that. I'd love to talk with you more about that. Appreciate it.
Let me know. And so sorry, I won't say that much on any other question, but what's up?
Yeah, the next one was, is this model only relevant in relation to the workplace? Is it relevant for self-employed, for example, sole traders?
Yes, and so it is. Now, the original thought here was that it was a work, not a whole life model. Was the original thought. And so if that the original thought was looking at leadership behaviors. However, what they wound up with these 28 drivers, while it does have a workplace foundation, was the original intent, these things speak to life in terms of what is my purpose? I mean, how much collaboration do I like? Am I into forgiveness? Am I into creativity? And it really speaks to everything, to how you live your life. And so it will impact the relationships you have. These drivers you have impact the relationships you have. And so it's not just good for, is it good for workplaces versus independent folks, both, but it's also something that you find plays out and that you can apply in my personal life in my relationships with my kids, and my relationships with so it's a whole life thing. Even though the initial thought was, let's do something that leaders will find indispensable.
Awesome. We got a question from Michelle regarding score clustering. Any work on gender or culture bias in scores?
Yes. And so one of the things that is so with 28 scales, it'll be too much to go on now. So let me give you the executive summary on that. That as with any good model, it's vital that they say when they're talking about their norm group, I mean the group that they go into and know everything about, how do these different drivers play out in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of race and ethnicity. And those are the big three that this tool does, but that any tool does want to look at. And there are there are a few things around race that are interesting. They're small and trivial, but they're there. There's some big ones with gender, as you might guess, that some of these on average, men tend to be more driven by X and drained by Y, and women more drained by Y and driven by that kind of thing. And so it's not every one of them, but there are clusters of those that are the case. There are a few around age that, for the most part, no one's asked me this yet, but my assumption is somebody's sitting on it. That do these change, or is the assumption that these kind of stay stable, or do they change over time? These tend to be psychometrically. These tend to be pretty stable variables. As in retest reliability tends to be pretty stable, and but what we do know is that some of these are age dependent, asterisk for the most part. For instance, status and personal wealth tend to be a little higher, a little more active in younger people than they are in older people. And that's not that that older people are more Buddha-like and these damn millennials and all they care about is, so that doesn't have anything to do with that at all. It's that generally, not always, but generally, older people already have the status and have already acquired more of the wealth. And so that's a box checked. The legacy tends to be more important to older people than it is to younger people. And so some of that just kind of is logical, you would guess it, and it's true. But for the most part, it's these tend to be pretty stable variables. So I think it was Michelle who asked that, but anyway, the idea of, is this checked for that? Yes, it is. And and that's and so I think it's important when you're kind of looking at a group to take a look at, to kind of fold that in, just so that it's all out in the open.
Thanks, Hyle. Carol had a question. Is the DRIV report set up similar to the EQI report that provides strategies for action to develop the driver?
Yes. And so one of the things that what the DRIV report does, so yes and no. What the DRIV report does is give you some strategies for action on the factor level. And so so what we were talking about, like I talked about forgiveness, as we drilled into that for a while. Forgiveness is one of the 7 harmony factors. And so what the DRIV report will do is say, let's talk about some ideas around harmony, which actually includes all 7 of these. Here's some things you can think about. Here's some things you could do. Here's how this works for you. Here's how it doesn't. And so that's good. I think dealing with the drivers themselves, going to those 28 drivers and making actionable those things, not all 28, that's overwhelming, but picking 2 or 3, and I'm going to do some work on those. That's where the gold is buried here. And so that's the reason I did the DRIV to Action workbook, just because I needed something that would go to that level of granularity. And if I decide, Michelle's working with me and she decides, that you're going to work with me on service, or Karen, and your work with me, you're going to, persistence is something you want to work with me on. Well, then let's get in there and talk about how do we do energizing work, or how do we do optimizing or leveraging? And those are the 3 kind of options you have: optimize, energize, leverage. And we could take any one of those paths. It's like a road that forks in 3 directions. We can go down any one of those with any one of these 28. And that workbook helps give you specific ideas on how to do that work. So yes, it is provided between the report a little bit. The workbook specifically was written for that purpose.
Perfect. And this is the last question that I have. So feel free, anyone else, to add any other questions. But there's a question around what other assessments did you look at in the drivers area? And I guess just more broadly, Hyle, if you want to talk about how we came about bringing this on, what we thought about, all that good stuff, how it plays with the other assessments that we certify on, all that good stuff will be helpful.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things I was I love behavioral assessments. I think they're really important, like the emotional intelligence, like the EQI, and that just look at the behaviors. And so, Pamela, how much of behavior X, how much do you do? And Ralph, how much do you do? And if it turns out you don't do as much as you think you should to be successful, well, then how do you do more? I mean, it's just a very practical behavioral assessment. But what I also want and think is important, just for me as a consultant, for us as a consultancy, to have something that lets us get, in addition, not instead of, but in addition to that, to get underneath that, to say, but why? Why is this easier for you than that? Why do you like this, and why do you get kind of oppose, or why are you drained by this other? And that piece is really important. Historically, the MBTI has played somewhat of a role there, because that is a model, which you might know about this, you might be a fan, you might not be, it's relevant for this conversation, but the Myers-Briggs is about hardwired cognitive preferences, how my brain is wired to take in data and make decisions. And that cognitive wiring is an explanation for why I find this easier than that, and why I'm drawn to this and I struggle with this other. I mean, so that's one of the ways we've always used type here. But this is a deeper and frankly a little more complete way of answering that why question, because it really gets into this. The theory of planned behavior is a really powerful one to understand the drivers underneath. And there aren't a lot of tools that do that. One of the there are other tools that hint at it, or that are tangential to it. The Big Five makes a claim about that. I don't think a very good one. That StrengthsFinders attempts to do that. Here are the things you do out in the world. StrengthsFinders is great and has a lot of benefits to it. The problem with the StrengthsFinders is that all of these things are framed as strengths, and it's about you have it or you don't. And what I like about the DRIV is that here are these 28 things, and no matter where you are, it tells you something interesting about it. So it's not like ideally you have a high score on this. It actually means something pretty telling on the low end as well. And so that gives us more power and granularity than the StrengthsFinders has. Also, the StrengthsFinders, one of the problems I had with that, while I like a lot of it, it's about whatever your strength is, go do more of that. Just so double down on that. And while I like the positivity of that, it really does blind us to, and by the way, here's how some of that, when maximized, is getting in your way. And here's what you also need to work on. And and it intentionally avoids making that step. And I really like taking that step. And so in looking for this, I found this to be something that had the psychometrics, the reliability, validity behind it that I liked, that played nicely with all the other tools I have on our bench, but yet still filled an important role. So I hope that's enough of an answer there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hyle. I appreciate that. That was all the questions that I had in the chat. If I missed one, feel free to come off mute and share that with us. Otherwise, just the last thing is just a big thank you to everybody for taking time out of your Thursday to join us. We're super grateful for it. And thank you all for joining us and listening. And Hyle, anything else that you'd add, or any kind of closing remarks?
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate your openness and curiosity and your questions. So Harris is going to send you just a thank you with some connections if you want to take us up on that. And Harris, would you mind putting my email, just why I can't talk and type at the same time about that. But in the chat pod, I appreciate that. Dana, you had said I'd love to talk with you about that. So the ball's in your court. If you'd like to give me an email, we can arrange to do that. But let me know if there's a question or an issue, or not just for Dana, anybody, if you want to let me know. And you can, if you want to take this thing, actually, if you are interested in taking it, I would take it soon and don't do any other reading or research or talking to anybody about it. I'd go in as cold as you can. I think you get the best handle on any new tool that way. And that'll follow up with a feedback session that we'll schedule here in the short term, and maybe we'll get to connect in that way. But anyway, I thank you for coming, and I hope we get the chance to work or see you sometime soon. Thanks, Karen. Thank you, Dana. See you, Pamela.